Hello, and welcome to tonight's Bowl session. Thank you all for joining us. This is a conversation about Pericles by William Shakespeare, and it is in conjunction with the reading that we presented this last Monday that is still available on YouTube and the Red Bull website through tomorrow at 7:30. I would be surprised if anybody's here who hasn't seen it, but if you have friends who haven't, you still have another about 24 hours to watch it, so definitely check that out. I am Nathan Winkelstein. I'm the Associate Artistic Director of Red Bull Theater, and I will be your moderator. Tonight, I am beaming into you from Lenape Land, also known as Harlem, New York. And it is a true joy to be here. The tech for tonight should be relatively straightforward for everyone who is watching. If you look at the bottom of the screen, you will see that you have a Q&A function. Please use that function to ask any questions you have tonight, and we do want you to ask questions. I also think we have the box checked. That means you don't see other people's questions. So one, please don't assume that you are talking into a pure void. Other people do ask questions. But two, please also don't assume that I have a huge list of questions either. So if you have a question, please really do ask it, because that would be great for us. That is really it. Technically, this should be a great combo, and I want to introduce sort of the first wave of guests for tonight. First of all, that is the great director, Kent Gash, who directed our reading of Pericles. Kent, if you could turn your camera on. And then the wonderful scholar, Noémie Ndiaye from University of Chicago. If both of you could turn your videos on, that would be great. Hi, Noémie.
Hi, Nathan.
I want to make sure Kent is Kent is joining us now. I think you're still muted, Kent. Here, I'll unmute you. There we go. Now you're unmuted. It's hard to beam in from space, y'all, so we had to give him a couple of minutes there.
Oh yeah, right. I wish.
Hi, Kent. Hi, Noémie. Thank you so much for joining us. I wanted to start just to give us a kind of an organized way in. Obviously, most of the people here have seen some of what Kent thinks about Pericles through the beautiful reading that he presented on Monday. And many of the attendees have probably read Noémie's program note for this, but I would love for Noémie to introduce herself a little bit more and maybe speak a little bit about Pericles and maybe what you found most interesting or exciting about the particular presentation that Kent directed this past Monday.
Thank you, Nathan. Thank you for having me. Hi, Kent. I'm glad to be here. I loved the reading. I love this play. I love Pericles. It's not, it's not studied enough. It's underappreciated, and I found that it worked actually really well on Zoom, right? Because it's a play that travels so much, where space is a problem. Zoom was actually paradoxically a really good medium for it. So thank you for offering us this reading. My very brief comments will focus on two things that I found particularly exciting about what you proposed in this production, in this reading, and it's based on casting practices. So I'm going to share those comments, and then I will ask you a question. I have more questions for the cast, but I want to ask you one in particular. So, comments about casting practices. First, it has to do, I love what you did with the politics of the people. So I'm thinking about the fisherman in particular. I'm thinking about the double casting, and I'm really happy that Anthony is with us tonight, because this will speak directly to him. So I just love how you decided to have the same pair of actors, Anthony and Edward, who are both called the clowns in the program, having them play the fishermen, but also the good folks of Tyre, who get fed up with their absentee ruler and turn to Helicanus. They also play the sailors, who are concerned with the kind of curse and tempest that Theseus' corpse is going to bring on them, and want that corpse to be thrown overboard. They're also the pirates. There's more, but basically this pair of actors play all the characters that represent the people in need who are asking the ruler, the powers that be, for sustenance, protection, care, right? Who are reminding those rulers that they have obligations towards them. Those nice aristocratic, living in their little romantic bubble, they're not off the hook, right? And I was, listening to the awesome Exploring Pericles seminar that you participated in a couple of weeks ago. I was very interested in what Madeline Sayed said about community, right? She pointed out that Pericles is a play that moves from culture to culture, from world to world with the serial logic. And she brought up the question of community, pointing out that very often punishment doesn't seem to be felt communally, right? And so that question has stayed with me. What's the role of community in the play? And it seems to me that in your production in particular, this decision to demultiply the fisherman, in a sense, with this double casting decision, brings up the question of the community, right? We cannot escape the politics of the fishermen who are alerting us to the fact that the drones are consuming all of the honey in the land, that enclosures is wrong, is hurting the little people, and their general ethos of radical solidarity. That is something which I felt radiating throughout the performance because of the decision to have those actors come back. Anytime I saw them, I saw the fishermen. And the more I think about this play, the more I find that the fisherman's ethics is perhaps what is most interesting. So I just love that decision. That's the first thing I wanted to say. And then the second thing, it has to do with race-conscious casting. So of course, getting into this reading, the big question I had was, okay, is this colorblind casting or is this race-conscious casting? And when I saw that you were putting both the power of storytelling, which is Gower's power, and the power of healing, which is Sarimon's power, into the hands of the same person, well, first it's the same person, right? So there's a connection between healing and storytelling, but it's in the hands of a senior Black woman, right? Played by the regal Michelle Shea. I thought, okay, good. I started suspecting that good trouble was afoot, but things really clicked for me in Act 5, Scene 1, which is the reunion scene when Marina is reunited with Pericles, right? I see you nodding. That's the emotional.
Yeah, that's why you do the play. That
right,
scene
exactly.
For me.
Exactly, right? That's a moment we all remember. That's a moment T.S. Eliot rewrites in his poem, right? And in that moment, when I heard Marina, and Callie is with us today, so I'm really, we really have the good folks here. That's excellent. When I heard Callie say those lines, and she was particularly eloquent in that moment. My derivation was from ancestors who stood equivalent with mighty kings, but time has rooted out my parentage, and to the world and awkward casualties bound me in servitude. That's the moment when race-conscious casting came through, right? That's the moment when the interaction between the identity of the performer and the text as it was written generates a meaning that exceeds the meaning originally intended by Shakespeare in the most interesting, moving, powerful ways.
Yes.
And all the more so since in that moment, she was in conversation with Diana, right? The goddess Diana, played by Shireen Babb.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Shireen, it felt like she was talking to the ancestors, right? Directly.
Right.
In the moment of atonement. So it just, in that moment, I was like, okay, I feel like the entire casting scheme was designed to lead to this. To those 5 lines in that moment. And so I wanted to ask you whether you could talk a little bit about, about the process here, because I heard you say during the Exploring Pericles seminar that you very much wanted to talk about the experience of the Black family as informed by Middle Passage epistemologies. So I'm wondering, did you start reimagining that scene and then move backwards, right? To structure?
No, for me, it's interesting. I mean, I think you're always asking in every play you do, why do I want to tell this story? And what do I have to bring to telling this story? And why should we tell this story right now? And I felt that all the way back when Jesse and Nathan invited me to work on Pericles, I said, well, let me go back and read the play, of course, because, and I felt instantly that I wanted it to be, because it's a very unusual play. There's a lot of, in the scheme of Shakespeare's plays, they're all unusual, actually. None of them are like any others. People always say that, and it's always like, what are you talking about? But I did feel strongly that the play was a kind of fable or parable for adults, maybe, or more adult than not. I mean, it's not like a fairy tale or a Disney story, but that it was really about how the absurd brutalities visited upon Black people, people of the African diaspora, and those who have been colonized, how those brutalities and the lives lost and the families destroyed and the morals corrupted because you have been detached from your ancestry, detached from your root, that in fact, that detachment could be healed through the telling of a story that addressed that and that illuminated sometimes absurd brutalities visited, not one tempest, but two does he have to go through. And so, and yet we survive. Yet there is resilience, yet we continue to rise. And I felt like there was the opportunity for this tale to inspire and to heal. And that if there was some ancestral leadership in Gower, that Gower was telling this tale for the community, that whatever community needed to hear it, because even today, being Black, there are moments when we question whether or not we will be able to survive, because the absurdities and the brutalities continue to mount up. And so we need tales of healing, tales of resilience, tales of redemption and reconciliation that heal us enough for us to know that we can be reunited with our family, we can access the root, and we can rise and thrive. And in fact, we must, and we will, and there will be great joy in the doing of that. And so that, to me, everything I wanted to do was based on that, shooting the story through that lens. Wasn't, it wasn't about really, I added some music and, there were some things that I wanted to touch through that, but I always feel like in any play, 95% of the concept is the casting. Who's telling the story? Who are the human beings? Because finally, the human beings are going to be the thing we're going to access it through. 10 tons of scenery, which is often the case, design in Pericles. It's like, we don't have all that. And actually, we don't need all that. Black people don't need all that. We're used to not having anything and making it with nothing. So the trick was get the best people you can possibly get, because actors are magical and Black people are magical. It's the only way we've lasted this long. And so that was, it probably sounds overly simplistic, but really a great director looks for the best actors, and then you kind of get out of the way.
Can I jump in? And just because it's it's just sitting there as a perfect transition to introduce the couple of actors that we have with us.
Yes,
could I please introduce the wonderful Callie Holly and Anthony Michael Martinez, who have joined us for this chat. If both of you can join, that would be great. Hi, Anthony. Hi, Callie.
Hi.
Hey, good.
Hello.
And I believe that Noémie did a very good job of introducing what both of these wonderful actors performed, but Anthony was one of these clowns who performed all the people. And then Callie played some character called, I don't know, Marina or something like that, who's, I guess, important to the play in some way. And thank you both for joining us. And
yes, I'm so happy to see you.
Thanks for having me.
This is just a slight reminder that always happens 15 minutes in, and then I get 30 of them, so it's great. So slight reminder, 15 minutes in, please do ask questions. I currently have none, so please do ask questions so that we can have the Q&A. In the meantime, I may lean heavily on our wonderful scholar guest, because she did mention that she had some questions. And I was wondering if you had anything for any of the performers or for the group.
Yes, absolutely. First, I want to say I'm so grateful for the account you just gave us, Ken. That was so eloquent, and that's why you do the work. So this is the best possible way of framing it, really. I have a question which is about possibly attention. Maybe it's not attention. Maybe this is not how you experience it. So I'd be curious to hear how you worked with the text to the extent that the text is in itself oriented, racially speaking, toward fairness. So just bear with me for a sec. I'm going to nerd out just for a few minutes to explain what I have in mind. But if you look at the vocabulary that the play is using, then you'll see that the word fair is used 23 times. This is something I touch upon in the playbill. And distinguished scholar Kim F. Hall in Things of Darkness has argued quite authoritatively that in the early modern period, the word fair emerges as a term that is synonymous with whiteness, that contains the possibility for referring to racial whiteness, right? So, working with Kim's with Kim's warning in mind, you realize that in the play that there's a very strong color coding, right? Pericles' intense grief is coded as Black. It's melancholy, the Black humor that takes over his internal complexion. And I did notice that you had your Pericles dressed in Black. Nice touch. And he comes to be known by his sable banners, right? His ship is a black ship, right? He has this force of blackness moving through the oceans. But what he's looking for is fairness, right? The element that somehow heals him, that assuages his pain, his grief, his melancholy, his depression, is always the fairness of these women, whether it be Antiochus's daughter, who is characterized as fair, or Thaisa, who is the wondrous fair Thaisa, or Marina, right, who is the fairest of them all. And I like the way in which Callie, in conversation with the actress playing Dionysa, there was an emphasis on the complexion, preserve your complexion. I was looking at your face in that moment, but I'll return to that. So basically, what I'm trying to say is that this is a play that can very easily read as a quest for fairness, as a curative quest for whiteness, right? Written in this moment, 1608, when England was starting to emerge as a power that wanted to be a colonial power and that wanted to get into the business of whiteness, of manufacturing itself as white, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's something that's very deeply embedded in the text. So my question is, how do you wrestle with that, right? How do you produce the kind of stories that you want to tell through Pericles when you're working with a text like that? That's a question for you, Kent. And my question for Callie is, how did you respond when you were working with the text, when people were calling you fair, talking about your, your white fingers? How did you work with that as a performer?
Well, we changed that. We cut some of those lines. And I have to say, because I don't associate fair, either morally fair, I don't associate the idea of fair with whiteness. I don't. So if I don't, because that word has a number of connotations, and because part of what Pericles is questing and what the world is seeking is a kind of reorganizing or redirecting or writing of a moral compass that has gone way wrong when Antiochus is sleeping with his daughter. And so for me, it's about a kind of innate sense of fairness of the soul and of the heart, meaning just, fair as kind, leading with grace, which is where Pericles wants to begin. And it takes him the whole journey of his life to get back to that, based on everything that he encounters in the corrupted world. So my feeling is the minute you put certain people in it, things mean what you intend them to mean. And not, because I don't know that most people are watching it from a 1608 context. I don't think we can. So we see what we see and hear what we hear. And while we may think about the author's intent, a great deal of the authority comes from the person who's embodying the character in the moment that you receive the story. So the second it's being told by these people, the story changes. And on some level, it becomes about what we say it's about, with all due respect, because we're the only version of it that you've got while you're watching. So, and that, of course, is the magic of actors, because it becomes, if anybody was thinking about Callie wishing she was white or something when she was playing Marina, then they were watching the wrong play, and I can't help them, nor do I care to. I'm not interested. If that's, if that's where they go when they're watching it, then they're not going to like my work. They're not going to like what I do. And that's okay. Maybe I'm not doing it for them.
I have a quick follow-up, but Callie, maybe you want to say something.
I think Kent said it so well. I think he's so wonderful, and the reason that I always am so excited to work with him and be guided by him is for that very reason. I think that he's so wonderfully intelligent and also creative that he was able to guide my instincts in the way of redefining fairness for myself as a human being and for the character, and contextualizing that in empathy and in purity, truly in the way that in the way that this character sees others, and guiding with, as he said, grace and empathy and love, and particularly seeing the best in people. And that fairness in that sense was giving people the opportunity to be their best selves in this play and in this work. And that's the direction that Kent guided me in, and the instinct that I was able to follow. And so it really is in that, not just redefining of fairness, but also in that reclamation of what it can mean for ourselves, looking the way that we look and moving through the world in the way that we do as people, as artists, and also in the world that we were creating with this play. So definitely great on Kent.
It's you, baby.
Sorry, go ahead, Ken.
No, I was just going to say it's really, it's there. I mean, you're being very kind. Thank you. It's really, I feel like Callie possesses so many of the qualities, just as a human being, possesses so many of the qualities that the character has to have. And it's the kind of thing that you can't direct. You can't direct someone to play that. They either have it or they don't. Now, she's got great skills in other ways, the language chops, sings like a thrush, beautiful, all of that comes. But the spirit part, you can't teach that and you can't direct it. It's either in someone or it isn't. So it means certain actors who might be highly skilled are not right for it. She happens to have all those qualities and is profoundly skilled. So there you go.
Thank you.
The best for the job, indeed. And so what I heard you both, what I got from your answer to my question, which I'm grateful for, is that the difference between a play like Pericles and a play like Othello, for instance, is that when you do Pericles, you have a choice, right? You can decide to not hear some of the meanings that were attached to the language of fairness in that time period. With Othello, you can't, right? And what I hear from you is, if you can, leave that behind, then you should. Thank you. Thank you for this answer.
So we have a question from the audience that I want to toss into the space. This is from Christina Straub. And it was, she's very interested in the actors' use of different accents, which kept drawing her to the Caribbean. Was the play taking us to the Black Atlantic, the site of both brutality and cultural exchange? Or was it to help differentiate characters on a Zoom call, right? Like it can also be practical, or was it both? Kent, that's probably best for you, though I'd be curious what Anthony, as one of the people who had to differentiate, would also say about it. Kent?
I mean, I'll start, and I certainly want Anthony to jump in because he's a master of so many things, this included. I think for me, it was part of the fun of exploring any play and being in any process is if you cast a wonderful group of actors, they're going to have ideas. And my feeling is the most interesting and compelling ideas should win. They don't all have to come from me, and often many of them don't. So when people wanted to play with dialects and certain regions and cadences of speech, I was like, my response is what it always is, well, let's try it and see what we get. Try it and see what it means. What does it manifest? What does it tell us? What I also knew it would bring is a sort of deeper commitment to a deeper commitment on the actor's part, or a deeper investment, because they're able to bring some of their impulses and creativity into the making of whatever the story is telling is going to be. I want the actors to be involved. And as the director, I'm sort of arbiter and editor and putting together and saying, yes, this, no, not so much that, but I want, so for me, it was, and yes, it does help differentiate often things like class, things like worldview, in certain sounds and cadences are expressive in that way. And I think it really, I wanted them to be as free in the exploration of the play as I wanted to be. And the only thing that I asked people not to do was if there was something that was tried that I thought, actually that change of sound sort of overwhelms our ability to understand what the character's doing and what they intend. At that point, then I would say, let's pull back to something that's a little less regionally specific or geographically specific, so that we can really hear what the text is doing and how it's informing or manifesting the humanity of it. So it was really a lot of trial and error and a lot of wonderful imagination and impulses from a great group of actors, and then giving them the space to run with it and go,
So much of it was provided in the text. Obviously, they talk about the Spanish pirate or the whatever. So I thought I would, bring a little bit of a Spanish flair into that. But it was interesting because you actually did allow us to have and give us permission to be so free with discovering a voice, not only just individually, but collectively with Edward as well, with the clowns. And maybe it was okay to have them from different regions, and in a way that served the brotherhood, the unity of the brotherhood. And I felt when I first read the text, I thought of Status. I thought of, they're fishermen. Pentapolis is where they're coming from. So I didn't know if there was a specific type of dialect for that. But I just thought the Cockney served it well. And I thought it brought a certain musicality to, I think, the surreality of these different worlds that helped to differentiate not only the characters, but also the feeling. in the space. You know, they're of the earth, they're of the, you know, the land and the fishes and things like that. So
yeah.
Sorry,
Sorry, go ahead.
I just wanted to jump in. This is just something from Noémie's comment about fairness as whiteness. She wrote something to us. Do you mind me sharing what you wrote in the chat to the panelists? Do you mind me sharing to the attendees? It's just about, like, if you're interested in why that argument is authoritative. I'm just going to put it in everybody's chat where it was first proposed, if you're interested in reading more about that. So I just wanted to make sure everybody was getting that. And then, sorry, Kent, that was my only interruption. Please continue.
Oh, no. I was just going to say that, you know, a little bit of my, approach to this work, in particular with this group of actors, was, you know, many of us, I was an actor myself in another life, and performed a fair amount of Shakespeare, and was sometimes one of the only Black people in the room doing it, and was never actually directed in a Shakespeare by anyone of color. And I also wanted to make a space in the room where people really had a lot of freedom, that nobody was saying, well, you know, the meter has to do this, and the trochee is actually, and I'm like, yeah, I know, but what is the human event? And I'm the human being in the room. So what is the human event? Because finally, it's the human event that people are experiencing, and we either get something or we don't. And that's true for the actors too. And sometimes the experience of being a person of color in a quote unquote classical play or in a Shakespeare can be traumatizing. And I wasn't about to have any of that. I wasn't. I wanted whatever the Pericles that we were going to make was going to be what we said it was. And people either, you know, if you have an opinion or stand for anything, some people are going to love you and like your opinion, and some people aren't. And I'm good with that. But I knew I wanted these actors to feel like they owned it, that they made something from themselves and collectively that they could be proud of and be happy about being a part of, and be excited about coming to rehearsal every day, and not wonder who's going to tell them how they have to say it every time they step into the room. You know? So there was a particular room I wanted to make sure and make.
And you
and
did.
The actors, it's up to them to say whether or not we got to that. I'd like to think we did, but maybe I just need to think that, you know.
We did.
I realize I'm the moderator. I shouldn't really engage fully, but I did want to say, Kent, that from a personal perspective, there have been a lot of conversations recently, I think, about what we're making and who we're making it for and how we make it. And I think the way that you just phrased it about how basically seeking the truth of the people in the room, seeking that truth is what art is. There isn't a right and wrong. Like, if we want right and wrong, we go into math and science. Like, all we can do is truth, and bring the truth of the individuals in the space, whichever those individuals are. So anyway, I thought the way you phrased it was very good and very inspiring for something that I think is something that artists wrestle with a lot. So I just wanted to say that I appreciate that.
Good, thanks. Thanks, yeah.
On a completely different note, but it's the only other question we have. Come on, audience, come on. I know you've got them in you. I've met like half of you. I know that you have questions. But this one I think that Noémie or perhaps myself can handle. This is just about the authorship of Pericles. My understanding of the authorship is that it's relatively well accepted at this point that George Wilkins wrote the first couple of acts, the parts that, as this attendee writes, you can sort of tell maybe weren't Shakespeare. And then around Act 3 with that beautiful speech in the second Tempest with Pericles and the death of the death of Thaisa seems to be when Shakespeare took over. Noémie, is that correct?
Yes, that's pretty much the critical consensus. Although I would add that I feel like George Wilkins must have known Shakespeare's work really well, because the tournament scene, right, the moment when Thaisa is, deciding whom she wants to marry, for me is very reminiscent of the casket scene in The Merchant of Venice, right?
Yeah.
There's three suitors. The first one associated with the Ethiopian sign, right, as Prince of Morocco, and then the Spanish one, like Aragon.
Yeah.
I think Shakespeare chose his partner well, is how I would put it.
Well, and it also feels to me there's a speech, Grantham and I were talking about this, but there's a speech in the first half where it feels like Shakespeare, after he had done his half, went in and said, it would be good if he had like one or two little speeches where he talked about, kind of what's going on for him. So why don't you let me give those a little polish? Because it feels like it's those couple of moments when Pericles is by himself, even after the first scene, when he discovers the madness of Antiochus and Antioch. There's those speeches are structured in a way that don't feel like any of the writing that is immediately before them or immediately after them. And it feels to me like they were inserts that Shakespeare did later, that he did once the stuff was finished.
If any of you are curious, I think the speech, Grantham and I had the same conversation. It's like, oh, look, Pericles is Hamlet. I think it's top of Act 1, Scene 2. It's this change of thoughts, the sad companion, dull-eyed melancholy, be my so used a guest as not an hour speech, which is like, oh, look, inner thought. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, that does not reek of George anybody except, Willie Shakespeare. I mean, yeah.
Nathan, I have another question, but I don't want to distract from.
Please save me. My attendees aren't saving me. So please.
Right. I wanted to ask you all actually about the the reach of the call the conscious dimension of casting, right? So we've discussed what Marina's identity brings. I loved, Anthony, that the way you talked about the inclusion of the Cockney accent and also a white identity among the fishermen, right, as creating the sense of interracial brotherhood. So there, to me, the addition of race-conscious casting is clear. I was wondering about the inclusion of actors of South Asian descent, in particular in the role of Thaisa, Dionysa, and Helicanus. I'm wondering whether, what was going on there, whether this was, what kind of meaning this was generating for you.
I will say, with Thaisa, again, there were qualities that I wanted her to have, that character to have, that I think embody who she is. And I've known Kimberly for a very long time and think that she's spectacular. And also, again, I have agendas. I want it to look like the world. Yeah. And that doesn't just mean all Black people in every part. It means we have within the diaspora, particularly if we're really talking about places that have been colonized, they needed to, I wanted their people and those actors and their humanity represented in this story as well, because they have suffered senseless brutality and absurd kinds of atrocities at the hands of colonialism as well. So this narrative belongs as much to them as it does to us. You know, it's that moment where you sort of compare my suffering is worse than your suffering. You know, listen, I'm not really with that. And so if I have a regret, it's that I was not able to, that we were not able to cast either, you know, potentially Japanese or Chinese, other Asian or Pacific Asian characters in the play, because especially given where we are right now and the rise in hate crimes against the Asian population, you know, so I just wanted global representation. And they were wonderful actors who were available, and those roles seemed to make sense to me. So I don't know if that's the true answer. It may not be the most interesting or provocative, but
it's a very good answer.
It's the truth, you know.
Thank you.
We have a few questions. They didn't come in through the Q&A. They came in through the chat, but at this point, I'm fine. It's fine. One for Kent, though, also one that I would be curious if anyone has an opinion on, actually, is you spoke of the play as a parable. Could you expand on what you see as the deeper meaning or the moral of the parable of this quest story?
Well, for me, and this is just for me, but this is sort of the story I was trying to tell. I mean, I in some ways I hesitate to say it because, and if we were in person, I would ask the person who was asking the question, what story did you get? What was your takeaway? Because whatever your takeaway was, that's the story we told to you. But for me, I wanted the takeaway to be Black people cannot be destroyed. No matter what you do, bring your tempests, bring your incest, bring all your crazy as you have for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, and we will not be destroyed. We will find our ancestors. We will contact our root. We will rise and we will live out the greatness of our potential. That's who we are. That's who many colonized people are forced into the realization of just how great their humanity is because of the endless and absurd brutalities visited upon them. For no other reason than another group of people feel like they can. So they do. And yet, we're still here, and we continue to thrive and lead in so many ways. And I want especially any young person who saw it, to be inspired by that. To take comfort in the fact that if Pericles went on that journey and suffered that much and still got his family put back together, still knew love, and never lost his sense of who he was and his sort of moral compass, as crushed as his soul was. We are stronger than we ever know we are. And so that's the takeaway for me.
To add on that, I would say that the spirit cannot be destroyed. For me, it's a spiritual play in a sense. It's all these worlds are kind of examples of divine providence. It's so structured the way the play is. It's like all of these things are happening, but the rebirth and the reconciliation, all in the end, suffering does exist, but transcendence is inevitable, and that in the end, goodness will prevail. And I think the play definitely strikes the question and the conversation and perhaps the calling for what it means to be good in today's society, what it means to be good towards your brother, what it means to be good as a leader. I mean, this is very Machiavellian in a sense. This is allegory of the cave. So yeah.
Yeah.
Since he's not here, I'll just speak for him. We had, as part of this month of conversation, we had a conversation with Raphael Nash-Thompson, who played Gower at Theater for a New Audience and also in Red Bull's very first ever production. And this question was asked of Gower, was asked of Raphael, because of course it's very important to Gower because he's telling the story. And he quoted, I feel like this is basically exactly what the two of you said, and I love that he quoted Shakespeare, is that in Gower's first speech, they say, the purchase is to make man glorious. Is that that it sits right in that first speech.
Exactly right.
So
exactly right. And you know, we as people, I think the people of color of the world, as the majority continues to increase, we need to be reminded of narratives where we can be put in the center and made glorious. So many narratives, and including this one, there is suffering in this narrative, undeniably. But baby, that fifth act, it's all about that fifth act. And normally in the fifth act, you know, you're just trying to like tie up all the plot ends and get people home before 11:30 or 12 o'clock at night, you know. And this fifth act, like, this is the payoff. This is the like, oh yeah, this is why we came to the theater. This is the, now all the pieces that seem like they should never come together, the sort of bleak, it's almost like Beckett at times. I mean, it's so bleak. And then Gatto actually turns up. You know, we don't wait.
Or was there all along, right? So in the
yes.
with the armor, but you know, just adding on to the conversation, or until Pericles could see it, perhaps. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
This is how Gower frames it at the beginning, right? This is a story that lords and ladies in their lives have read for restoratives, right? And I feel like with this particular mise en scène and production, you are proposing a restorative that we can actually use.
And that we need.
And that we
need.
Talking about need, I have a question that might actually be more for Nathan, but did I hear correctly that this recording is going to disappear? How am I going to teach Pericles in the future to my students? This is the version I want to use.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm very sorry. Yell at Actors Equity, not at us. We are, well, I mean, I guess I'm a member. You can yell at me as a member, but we are only allowed to do these because it is a replacement for live theater performance. We are only allowed to put them up for a certain amount of time. So it's, I don't know. I can't officially recommend bootlegging, but I don't know what's out there. But I officially do not recommend bootlegging. Let's say that out.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I will say, and this isn't going to help you in the short term, but I now, thanks to this inspiring group of actors, I kind of have a hunger to do this play. So I'm sort of quietly trying to have some conversations with people about, look, can we make this happen somewhere? You know, and really make it happen. Because I don't know, I learned a lot. That's all I can say. I mean, I learned a lot. I was moved a great deal by this group of people and by what the play actually does. You know, the play has a power. It's an unusual power. It's a little bit indirect, but boy, you know, it has a power. And I would love to do it with every single one of these people who was involved. I mean, I'm already trying to think about other plays I could do with these people, because it seems like they can do anything, you know, so. We'll see.
We want to see this show.
Well, I can say that I'm thrilled if that is part of what I was actually going to ask, like, does this inspire people to want to do this and to want to, so that's thrilling. We do have this is how it always works, is we hit 8:20 and something, we have a bunch of questions. So I am going to try to get a few of these in under the wire, because I know that some of us have some deadlines to leave right now, but there's one that is about, a couple people are commenting about it, about the sex trafficking aspect of this play, and how that was handled by the actors who are the sex traffickers and sort of have language that is representative of standard Shakespeare comedy, and yet they're sex traffickers, and then how it was for Callie playing a sex trafficked young woman, and how that was approached in the space. So that can be to Kent, to Callie, anyone who wants to jump in on that.
I think Callie should go first on this. I mean, you know.
So for me, certainly, I think the character's countenance is what I was first particular to pay attention to. And the way in which she navigated that situation, Ken and I talked a great deal about the experience of being captured and then brought into that situation really traumatically, but also very swiftly. And then through that, the development of these keen senses and ability to see the goodness in people anyway. And so I think what's really significant about that is that Marina's character actually, though she is certainly abused and afraid, navigates it by leading with empathy and being not smart enough, but graceful and intuitive and instinctual enough to bring out of people transformation and the better part of themselves. And I think that it speaks to what Kent was saying about, in real life, people of color enduring traumatic experiences and then understanding the fullness of their humanity. And then deeper than that, through this character, the ability to bring out the deepest and best aspects of the humanity of others as well.
And to diffuse something in Marina diffuses Lysimachus at his most libidinous. You know, she's like, yeah, you don't really want to do this. And he looks at her right away and is like, you're really young to be up in this. Like, this doesn't feel right. You know, and this is literally sort of how we were talking about it. It's like Lysimachus thinks he's there to do one thing, but has a moment of clarity when he's actually alone in the room with her. A moment of clarity that she leads and helps him to have, you know, and we did trim some of Pander and Baud and Bolt. We did trim back some of their text. I did make cuts there. And I'll tell you, I made those cuts for a couple of reasons. At a certain point, I know that the Elizabethans found those characters hilarious. I know they did, but it was, there's a certain kind of laugh that you pay for. And you can get a certain kind of laugh that can be huge. And then when you want the depth of soul payoff that I wanted in Act 5, you can't get it because you've gone so far afield in the other thing that people have actually, laughter can pull us into something or it can allow us to detach a little bit. And in those characters, the more we find ourselves laughing at people who do what they do, the more and more we're distancing ourselves from the humanity that we want engaged by the end of the play. So while they are functional and while they say some very funny things, and we try to keep some of the wit and humor of their characters, they're also not very good at what they do. You know what I mean? And that was actually the saving grace to me. It's like they're tired. They've been doing it a long time. And, in the immortal words of Hustle and Flow, it's hard out here for a pimp, and they're tired. Pander says, maybe we should hang this up. Maybe we've done this long enough. And also, what is that's really tired? Are they physically fatigued? Well, yes, hard work. And being on the hustle and being on the grind is hard work in all kinds of ways, always has been, always will be. But there's something else in them that's tired too, and that's their souls are kind of like enough already. This just isn't working. And so trying to balance those things is difficult, I think, always. It's always a question when you're in a Shakespeare, the things that the Elizabethan audience must have loved are sometimes things that a little goes a long way with the contemporary audience. So, that's every director and every group of actors is going to find their way through that aspect of the material in different ways. And I wanted our takeaway to be that they're not very good at what they do, and that Marina really flips the script.
And I want to say that the scene right after Marina and Lysimachus' scene with Marina
Bolt
talking to Bolt, you can see, and I think this is really interesting in a larger context, you can see, particularly when the Bolt's line, "What would you have me to do?" And then she names all of these other things and then says, "Anything but this thou dost." And I think that what's interesting in that is, in the context of how you could read and understand that in society and in the world today, is what happens to people when they feel they have no other options. And then when Marina gives these options, she has provided literally a possibility for the future. And I think that that's so significant, just because so much, it just speaks to her empathetic capacity, but just what do people do when they feel they have no options? And how do worlds open up when someone says, "Oh, but you do"?
Right. It's the great act of love. It is the great loving act when you can see better in someone than they can see in themselves. And you tell them.
And if I may just quickly add also, this is another moment when double casting worked amazingly well, right? Your decision to have Lysimachus played by the murderers, right? Who had
exactly right.
She flips him.
He's redeemed, right? He too gets redeemed. Yeah.
And I think, unfortunately, due to time restraints, we are going to have to call it there. But where better than on radical empathy, which I think is what the theater world and the whole world could use more of. So, I mean, if one of the things that makes man glorious is radical empathy, let this play always and ever be performed. So thank you all so much for joining for such a wonderful conversation. Thank you, everybody, for your questions and for helping to prompt this conversation. I'm going to say a couple of things about what's upcoming at Red Bull, and then we're going to be hanging up. There is no way to make the end of a webinar not incredibly sudden. So I just want to say thank you to everybody now, and so that you know when I push end, and then we're suddenly just in our spaces all by ourselves, that we are all loved and appreciated. But the next thing up for Red Bull, we are jumping into live in-person theater for the first time in 2 years. And we are doing a production of The Alchemist by Ben Jonson, updated by and adapted by Jeffrey Hatcher, directed by our artistic director, Jesse Berger. It is not the novel. It is as far away from the novel as it can be. It is a side-splitting screwball farce of magical proportions. So it's a different thing. But if you're in New York City, please do come check it out. Performances start on November 7th at New World Stages. Once again, this reading of Pericles is up for 24 more hours. Tell your friends. Then it does disappear forever. It does have that live theater ephemeral nature. So please do check it out. Thank you all once again. This has been a Red Bull Theater Bull session with the wonderful Noémie, Kent, Anthony, and Callie. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.